My husband ignored my calls all day. I sat at our dining table staring at his favorite pasta getting cold, my phone showing 17 unanswered calls. Brad walked in close to midnight, smiling like nothing happened. He sat down across from me, looked me straight in the eye, and said he slept with Sandra, his boss at the marketing firm. Said he didn't regret it, thought I should know. I said nothing. Just picked up my fork and continued eating my cold dinner while he watched, waiting for tears that never came. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? While Brad snored peacefully in our bed, I sat in the spare bedroom with my laptop, my fingers flying across the keyboard. See, what Brad didn't know was that I'd suspected something for 2 months. 2 whole months of watching him come home late, of noticing the expensive cologne that wasn't his usual brand, of seeing the way he smiled at his phone when he thought I wasn't looking. So I'd done what any smart woman would do. I'd gotten into his cloud backup. Turns out Brad wasn't as tech-savvy as he thought. He used the same password for everything our wedding date backward. I'd seen every text message, every photo, every hotel reservation. I documented it all, downloaded it all, organized it all into neat folders on my hard drive. But I'd waited for the right moment. And when he confessed last night with that smug smile on his face, I knew the moment had arrived. At 6 a.m, I heard Brad's alarm go off. I listened to him. Shower heard him humming in the bathroom. He always hummed when he was happy. The sound made my stomach turn. I went downstairs and spread everything out on the dining table. Printed emails, screenshots of text messages, credit card statements showing thousands of dollars spent on someone who wasn't his wife. Hotel receipts, restaurant bills, photos of him and Sandra at a company retreat, his arm around her waist, both of them laughing. I'd even printed the divorce papers I'd filed online at 5 that morning, the moment the courthouse system opened for electronic submissions. Brad came down the stairs at 6:15, exactly on schedule. He was wearing his gray suit, the one that made his eyes look blue. He'd worn it on our first date 7 years ago. The memory felt like it belonged to someone else's life now. "Morning, babe," he called out, his voice cheerful. "What's for breakfast? I've got that big meeting at 8 and I need to get going early." He walked into the kitchen, stopped dead when he saw the empty counter. No coffee brewing, no eggs and toast waiting. He turned toward the dining room and froze in the doorway. I was sitting at the table, dressed in the navy blue dress I wore to job interviews. Professional, composed. My laptop was open in front of me, but my eyes were on him. "What's all this?" he asked, his voice losing some of its morning brightness. "Come sit down, Brad." He walked slowly to the table, his eyes scanning the papers spread across its surface. I watched his face change as he recognized his own text messages, saw himself in those photos with Sandra. The color drained from his cheeks. "Danita, I can explain all of this." "You already explained last night." My voice was calm, steady. I'd practiced this moment in my head 100 times. "You slept with your boss. You don't regret it." Those were your exact words. I was tired. I wasn't thinking clearly. "Baby, we can work this out. It was just physical. It didn't mean anything." I slid the divorce papers across the table. "I filed this morning. You're being served at your office today at 9 o'clock. I wanted you to hear it from me first." Brad stared at the papers, then started laughing. Actually laughing. "You've got to be kidding me. You think this is how this works? You think you can just divorce me and walk away?" "That's exactly how it works." His laughter stopped. His face changed, hardened into something I'd never seen before. The mask slipped, and underneath was someone I didn't recognize. "You think you're smart," he leaned forward, his voice dropping to something cold and dangerous. "Good luck surviving without me, Danita." My heart started pounding, but I kept my face neutral. What's that supposed to mean? "This house, it's only in my name. I refinanced 2 years ago, remember? Those papers you signed. You thought they were routine mortgage documents. They weren't. You signed away any claim to the property. The words hit me like a physical blow. I remembered signing those papers. He'd brought them home from work, said the bank needed both our signatures. I'd been making dinner sign them without reading carefully. The joint savings account, Brad continued, and now he was smiling again. That same smug smile from last night. I emptied it 3 days ago, moved every penny to an account in my name only. That's $42,000 you can't touch. I felt the blood drain from my face. You can't do that. That's illegal. Prove it. You'd need a lawyer for that. A good lawyer costs about $5,000 just as a retainer. Do you have $5,000, Danita? I didn't answer. We both knew I didn't. Your car. The lease is in my name. I can report it stolen anytime I want. And before you think about getting a lawyer with legal aid, you should know that Sandra isn't just my boss. She practiced family law for 8 years before moving into marketing. She's been helping me protect my assets for months now. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the table. You've been planning this. Of course I've been planning this. You think I'm stupid? I knew eventually you'd figure it out. Sandra and I, we've been together for almost a year. We're in love. We're going to get married. But I'm not letting you take half of everything I've worked for just because you're jealous and vindictive. I'm not the one who cheated. Doesn't matter. I've protected what's mine. So go ahead, file your divorce. See how far you get with $800 in your checking account and a part-time job at a bookstore making $15 an hour. He stood up, straightened his tie. You're going to lose everything, and there's nothing you can do about it. He walked to the door, paused, looked back at me. Oh, and Danita, I'd pack your things today. I want you out of my house by the time I get home tonight. If you're still here, I'll call the police and have you removed for trespassing. The door closed behind him. I heard his car start, heard him drive away. Then I sat alone in the house that wasn't mine anymore, surrounded by evidence that suddenly seemed completely useless, and realized I'd just made everything so much worse. The motel room cost $45 a night. I'd found the cheapest place in town, a run-down building off the highway where the neon sign flickered and half the letters were burned out. The bedspread had cigarette burns, and the shower had rust stains, but it had a roof and a lock on the door. That was more than I'd have in a few days when my money ran out. I'd packed 2 suitcases of clothes, my laptop, and left everything else behind. Brad had changed the locks by the time I'd gotten back from the bank that afternoon. I'd tried my key 3 times before accepting the truth. I'd called him, and he'd answered on the first ring. I told you to be out by tonight. You're out. Problem solved. Brad, please? Some of those things are mine. My grandmother's jewelry, my photos, my books. Everything in that house is mine. You signed, remember? If you try to come back, I'm calling the cops. He'd hung up, just like that. At the bank, I'd confirmed what Brad had told me. The joint savings account showed a balance of $0.18. $42,000 gone. The teller had looked at me with sympathy when I'd asked where the money went. Your husband made a transfer to an external account 3 days ago. I'm sorry, ma'am, but with both names on the account, either party can withdraw funds. My personal checking account had $837. That was everything I had in the world. I'd worked at Patricia's bookstore for 3 years. It wasn't much, just 25 hours a week, but I'd loved it. Loved the smell of books, the quiet conversations with customers, the way Patricia treated me like family. My degree in English literature from community college hadn't opened many doors, but the bookstore had been perfect. Peaceful, safe. On my second day at the motel, I picked up extra shifts. Patricia had hugged me when I'd told her about the separation, didn't ask too many questions. Take what time you need, honey. But yes, I can give you more hours. Business has been slow, but I'll work something out. I threw myself into work. Restocking shelves, manning the register, organizing the storage room. Anything to keep my mind busy. Anything to avoid thinking about how Brad had outmaneuvered me at every turn. But even with the extra hours, I was only making about $375 a week before taxes. The motel was costing me $315 a week. That left $60 for food, gas, my phone bill. It was impossible math, and we both knew it. Our friends started calling, or rather, they started not calling. I'd see their posts on social media group dinners I wasn't invited to anymore, girls' nights that happened without me. When I finally reached out to Jessica, my closest friend from Brad's office crowd, she'd been cold. Look, Danita, I don't want to get in the middle of this. Brad showed us some text messages you sent him. The things you said, they were really concerning. He's worried about you. We all are. What text messages, Jessica? I never sent him anything like that. He showed us the screenshots. You were threatening him, saying crazy things. I think you need help. Professional help. Those aren't real. He's manipulating you. But she'd already decided. They all had. Brad was charming, successful, one of them. I was the quiet wife who'd always been a little odd, a little too bookish, a little too apart. Of course they believed him. I didn't find out how he'd created fake text messages until later. Turns out there are apps for that. You can create completely fabricated text conversations, make them look real, screenshot them. He'd been sending them to everyone we knew, building a narrative that I was unstable, jealous, mentally unwell. On a Thursday morning, 2 weeks after I'd filed for divorce, Patricia called me into her office. The bookstore owner, Mr. Harrison, was there. He was usually friendly, but that day his face was serious. Danita, I need to talk to you about something serious. Patricia's voice was tight, uncomfortable. There's been an accusation. My stomach dropped. What kind of accusation? Mr. Harrison spoke up. Your husband came to see me yesterday. He was very concerned about you. He said you've been under a lot of stress, and he thinks you've been stealing from the register. That's insane. I've never stolen anything in my life. He had documentation, security footage, timestamps that matched shortages in the register, receipts that appeared to be altered. He even brought a witness statement from a customer who claimed to see you pocketing cash. None of that is real. He's lying. Patricia, you know me. Tell him. Patricia's eyes were full of tears. I tried, honey. But Mr. Harrison has to protect the business. And the evidence Brad showed us, it looked very convincing. I'm sorry, Danita, Mr. Harrison said. But I have to let you go. Effective immediately. If you don't contest this, I won't press charges. But if you fight it or try to cause problems, I'll have no choice but to report this to the police. I'd walked out of that bookstore in a daze. 3 years of loyalty, of perfect attendance, of going above and beyond, gone in 5 minutes because my husband was a skilled liar with good Photoshop skills. I'd tried to go to the police, told them everything. The officer had listened, taken notes, but his expression had been skeptical. Ma'am, this sounds like a civil matter, a divorce dispute. We can't get involved in he said, she said situations. If you believe he's committed fraud, you'll need to hire a lawyer and pursue it through the courts. But he's destroying my life. He's lying to everyone, stealing my money, getting me fired. I understand you're upset, but unless there's evidence of a crime, there's not much we can do. Have you considered that maybe the stress of the divorce is making things seem worse than they are? Even the police thought I was hysterical, unstable, the crazy wife who couldn't accept that her marriage was over. I'd gone back to the motel, checked my bank account on my phone. $212 left. The phone bill was due tomorrow, $75. The motel wanted payment for the next week, $315. My car needed gas. I needed to eat. The math didn't work. I couldn't afford to stay, couldn't afford to leave, couldn't afford to do anything. I'd tried applying to other jobs, restaurants, retail stores, offices, but Brad had gotten there first. I started hearing the same things everywhere. We checked your references, and there were some concerns. We're going in a different direction. The position has been filled. He'd poisoned every well in town, made me unemployable. It was brilliant, really. Diabolical and thorough and completely effective. 3 weeks after I'd filed for divorce, I was evicted from the motel. I'd managed to pay for 2 weeks, but then the money ran out. The manager had been apologetic but firm. "I'm sorry, honey, but this is a business. No payment, no room." I'd loaded my 2 suitcases into my car, the leased sedan that Brad could repossess at any moment, and driven to the bookstore parking lot. It was quiet at night, well lit enough to feel safe. I'd parked in the back corner, reclined the driver's seat, and tried to sleep. That's where Patricia found me 4 days later. I woke up to knocking on my car window. The sun was bright, too bright, and for a moment, I didn't know where I was. Then, I remembered. I was living in my car, sleeping in a parking lot. This was my life now. Patricia's face was pressed against the glass, her eyes wide with shock and concern. I rolled down the window, tried to smooth my hair, aware of how I must look. I hadn't showered in 3 days. My gym membership, paid annually last fall when money wasn't a problem, was the only reason I'd been able to clean up at all. "Danita?" Patricia's voice cracked. "Oh, honey. No. How long have you been sleeping here?" "Just a few days." My voice was rough from sleep and from crying I'd tried to do silently in the dark. "I'm okay. I'm figuring things out." "You're not okay. Come on, get out of the car. We're going to the diner." "Patricia, I can't afford the diner." "I'm buying. Don't argue with me." She'd driven us to Helen's Diner, the 24-hour place on Route 30, where the coffee was strong and the pancakes were huge. She'd ordered me a full breakfast: eggs, bacon, pancakes, hash browns, orange juice. I'd tried to eat slowly to have some dignity, but I was so hungry that I'd practically inhaled it all. Patricia had watched me eat, her face sad and angry at the same time. Tell me everything, she'd said. And I mean everything. The truth. So I did. I told her about Brad's confession, about how he'd emptied our accounts and put the house in his name, about the fake text messages and the fabricated theft accusations, about how he'd systematically destroyed every avenue I'd tried to pursue, about how his boss Sandra was helping him do it all. Patricia had listened, her coffee getting cold in front of her. When I finished, she'd been quiet for a long moment. "I never believed the theft story," she finally said. "I want you to know that. But Mr. Harrison, he owns the store. I'm just the manager." When Brad came in with all that evidence, looking so concerned and professional, Mr. Harrison felt he had no choice. Brad was very convincing. "Everyone thinks I'm crazy." "You're not crazy. You're being abused. This is financial abuse, emotional abuse. What he's doing, it's calculated and cruel." She'd reached across the table, taken my hand. "My sister, Helen. You remember me talking about her?" I'd nodded. Patricia talked about her younger sister sometimes. Helen had moved away after college, lived a few towns over. Helen runs a small digital marketing consulting firm. Nothing huge, maybe 15 clients, but it's steady work. She needs someone to manage social media accounts for her clients. It's remote work, you can do it from anywhere. Pays about $40,000 a year. $40,000 a year. It had sounded like a fortune. "The thing is," Patricia continued, "you'd need reliable internet, a working computer, and a phone. Can you manage that?" I'd thought about my 8-year-old laptop that took 10 minutes to boot up my phone service that was about to be cut off for non-payment. The fact that I was literally homeless. "I don't know," I'd admitted. "Here's what we're gonna do. You're gonna stay in my spare room. I have internet, you can use it freely. You'll get this job, start earning money, and get back on your feet. No arguments." I'd started crying then. Couldn't help it. Patricia had moved to my side of the booth, put her arm around me, let me sob into her shoulder. It was the first real kindness anyone had shown me in a month. I'd moved into Patricia's spare room that afternoon. It was small but clean, with a twin bed and a dresser and a window that looked out onto her garden. She lived alone in a little house on the edge of town. Had lived there since her husband died 5 years earlier. "I have plenty of space," she'd said. showing me where the towels were, how the shower worked. Stay as long as you need. Let's just get you stable again. The job interview with Helen had been over video call. Helen looked like an older version of Patricia. Same kind eyes, same warm smile. I'd been terrified I'd mess it up, but Helen had been impressed with my bookstore experience managing their social media. You grew their Instagram following by 40% in 6 months. That's impressive for a small business. And you did all the graphics yourself. I taught myself, watched YouTube tutorials, practiced. It was fun, actually. You're hired. I need someone organized, creative, and reliable. Patricia says you're all 3. Can you start Monday? I'd started crying again, but this time from relief. Yes, thank you. You have no idea what this means. For 2 weeks, things had gotten better. I'd wake up in Patricia's spare room, have coffee with her in the morning, then spend the day working on my laptop at her kitchen table. The work was straightforward: schedule social media posts for Helen's clients, engage with followers, create simple graphics, write captions. I was good at it. The clients were happy. Helen was happy. I'd gotten my first paycheck direct deposited into my account. After taxes, it was about $2,900. I'd bought groceries to stock. Patricia's kitchen filled my car with gas, paid my overdue phone bill. For the first time in weeks, I'd felt like maybe, just maybe, I could survive this. That's when Brad found me. I didn't know he'd been tracking my car until he showed up at Patricia's house on a Wednesday evening. Patricia and I had been making dinner together, laughing about something silly, and then there was pounding on the door. Aggressive, angry pounding. Patricia had looked through the peephole, turned to me with fear in her eyes. It's a man, tall brown hair, looks angry. That's Brad. She'd opened the door with the chain still on. Can I help you? I need to talk to my wife. I know she's here. I tracked her car. You tracked her car? Patricia's voice had been shocked. That's illegal. It's my car. My lease, my insurance, my GPS tracker that I installed for security. Danita, get out here. Now. I'd walked to the door, stood behind Patricia. Brad had looked terrible. His hair was messy, his tie was loose, and his eyes were wild. You can't just disappear like that. You have responsibilities. What responsibilities, Brad? You took everything. You threw me out. You got me fired. That's not the point. We're still married. Technically. And I need to know where you are, what you're doing. This woman, he gestured at Patricia, she's interfering in our marriage. That's illegal too. I could sue her. Patricia had drawn herself up, all 5 feet 2 inches of her. Young man, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but you need to leave my property right now or I'm calling the police. Call them. I'll tell them my wife is unstable, that she's being manipulated by an older woman who's clearly taking advantage of her vulnerable state. They'll believe me. Everyone believes me. He'd been right about that, and we all knew it. But he hadn't stopped there. The next day he'd somehow found out where I was working. I still don't know how. Maybe he'd gone through my car while I was sleeping, found papers. Maybe he'd called Patricia's house pretending to be someone else, gotten information. But 2 days later, Helen had called me, her voice apologetic and sad. Danita, I need to talk to you about something. I received a very disturbing email this morning from a Brad Thompson. He says he's your husband. My heart had sunk. What did he say? He says you're under investigation for embezzlement from your previous employer. He attached what looks like a police report. It says you stole over $3,000 from the bookstore where you worked. That's not real. None of that is real. He made it up. He's been harassing me. I want to believe you, Danita. I really do. But I can't risk my business reputation on this. My clients trust me. If word got out that I hired someone who's under investigation, even if it's not true, it could destroy everything I've built. I'm so sorry, but I have to let you go. I'd sat at Patricia's kitchen table, phone in hand, and felt the last bit of hope drain out of me. Every time I got close to stability, Brad destroyed it. Every time I found help, he poisoned it. He was relentless obsessed, and he had all the resources while I had none. That night, Patricia had sat me down. She'd been crying. "Danita, you know I love you like a daughter. But Brad came back today. He was standing in my driveway when I got home from work. He threatened to sue me for alienation of affection for harboring you for interfering with his marriage." I looked it up, and most of that is legal nonsense, but, honey, I'm 63 years old. I live alone. I can't afford a lawyer. I can't afford the stress. I'm scared of him. I understand. And I had. Patricia wasn't abandoning me. Brad was driving her away just like he'd driven everyone else away. "You can stay a few more days until you figure something out. But after that, I think it's best if you find somewhere else. I'm so sorry." That night, I'd packed my 2 suitcases again, loaded them back into my car. The temperature had dropped. It was early November now, and the nights were getting cold. I'd parked in a different lot behind a grocery store that stayed open late. I'd reclined my seat, wrapped myself in the jacket I'd grabbed from Patricia's coat closet, and cried until I couldn't cry anymore. I'd lost everything again. Worse than before because this time I'd had hope. This time I'd thought maybe I could build something. But Brad had proved that no matter what I did, no matter how hard I tried, he could destroy it. He had the money, the connections, the ruthlessness, and I had nothing. I was so tired, so hungry, so cold, and for the first time I wondered if maybe I should just give up. Let him win. Sign whatever papers he wanted, agree to whatever terms he demanded, and just make the pain stop. It was 3 a.m. and I was sitting in the 24-hour diner where Patricia had bought me breakfast weeks ago. It felt like a lifetime ago now. I had exactly $2.43 left in my checking account. I'd ordered 1 coffee, and the waitress, a tired-looking woman named Susan, kept refilling it without charging me. Maybe she could tell I had nowhere else to go. Maybe she'd been where I was before. Either way, I was grateful. I was nursing my 4th refill when 2 young women slid into the booth next to mine. They couldn't have been more than 25, both of them animated and excited, laptops open on the table between their plates of fries. "I'm telling you, Amanda, we're going to hit 6,000 this month. 6,000. Can you believe it?" "I can believe it because you're a genius at this. When you quit your job at the call center, I thought you were insane. Now look at us." Right, I was making $12 an hour hating my life. Now we're clearing $5,000 a month selling digital planners. It's surreal. I'd tried not to listen, tried to mind my own business, but the words had pulled me in. 5,000 a month. Digital planners. Working remotely. They'd talked for almost an hour, their conversation washing over me. They discussed profit margins, Instagram ads, email marketing, customer service. They laughed about mistakes they'd made, lessons they'd learned. They talked about freedom, about being their own bosses, about building something that couldn't be taken away. And something clicked in my head, a realization so clear it felt like waking up. I'd been fighting Brad on his terms. Traditional employment, traditional divorce, traditional systems, and he'd beaten me at every turn because he controlled those systems. He had the money for lawyers, the connections to poison my reputation, the resources to track me down and destroy whatever I built. But what if I stopped fighting him on his battlefield? What if I built something he couldn't touch? Something invisible, something remote, something completely separate from this town and these people, and this life that had imploded around me. I'd pulled out my dying laptop connected to the diner's free Wi-Fi and started researching. That night, wrapped in my jacket in my car, I'd made a plan. It was desperate and far-fetched and probably impossible, but it was all I had left. The next morning, I'd driven to the library. I'd spent the entire day there using their computers because mine was too slow. I'd learned about freelancing platforms, Fiverr, Upwork, remote work sites. I'd read articles about social media management, about digital marketing, about people who'd built businesses from nothing. I'd created accounts on every platform I could find. Used a P.O. box address in a city an hour away, one that cost me my last $20 to set up. I'd listed myself as a social media manager, used Patricia's old colleague from college as a reference after sending her a desperate email explaining my situation. My profile was bare bones. No fancy graphics, no professional headshot, just a simple description. Experienced social media manager, grew small business Instagram by 40% in 6 months, affordable rates, reliable. Let me help your business grow. Then I'd waited, and waited, and waited. The first week, nothing happened. I'd check my profiles obsessively sitting in parking lots with my laptop balanced on my steering wheel using the Wi-Fi from nearby businesses. I'd apply to jobs, send proposals, undercut other freelancers on price. Still nothing. I'd been living in my car for 2 weeks by then. The November cold was brutal. My phone had been cut off again for non-payment, so I'd bought a cheap prepaid phone for $30, the absolute minimum plan. I'd been eating once a day, usually dollar menu items from fast food places. I'd lost weight. I couldn't afford to lose. I'd developed a cough that wouldn't go away. Sleeping in a cold car, not eating enough. The stress, it was all taking its toll. But I couldn't afford to see a doctor. Couldn't afford to be sick. So I'd ignored it. Pushed through it, told myself I just had to survive a little longer. On day 16, I'd gotten my first inquiry. A small business owner in Oregon needed someone to manage their Instagram account. They were offering $200 a month. It wasn't much, but it was something. I'd written back immediately, professional and eager. They'd hired me on the spot. $200. After the platform took its fee, I'd clear about $170. It wasn't enough to live on, but it was a start. It was proof that this could work. I'd spent every free moment working on that account. Taking photos with my phone, editing them with free apps, writing, engaging captions, responding to every comment, growing their following. The owner had been thrilled. Within a week, they'd referred me to a friend who had a small online shop. Another $200 a month. Then a third client. Then a fourth. By late December, I'd been making $750 a month from 4 clients. It was something. It wasn't enough, but it was more than I'd had. I'd been able to rent a motel room for a week, take a real shower, sleep in a real bed, eat real food. The cough had improved a little. But then Brad had noticed the deposits in my bank account. Because I'd been so stupid, I'd kept using the joint account for my freelance income. I hadn't thought about the fact that he could still see every transaction. The account had been frozen 2 days after Christmas. Brad's lawyer had filed a motion claiming I was hiding income that I owed half of my freelance earnings to the marital estate. Never mind that he'd taken $42,000 and left me homeless. Never mind that he'd destroyed my ability to work locally. He'd managed to freeze the one account I had with $900 in it, 3 weeks of earnings. Then he'd gone further. He'd reported me to the IRS claiming I wasn't reporting my freelance income. It wasn't true. I had every intention of reporting it when tax time came. But his complaint had triggered a flag on my PayPal account, and suddenly I couldn't receive payments anymore. My Stripe account was flagged too. Every payment processor I'd set up was suddenly frozen pending review. My clients had been understanding at first, but when they couldn't pay me, they'd had to find other freelancers. I'd lost all 4 clients in a single week. Brad's motivation hadn't been about the money. He made 6 figures. He didn't need my $700 a month. He just wanted me destroyed, wanted me broken, wanted me crawling back to him, begging him to take me back. I'd found out later that Sandra had been encouraging him. She'd told their friends that she felt sorry for me, but that I'd brought it all on myself. She'd laughed about it over drinks, according to someone who'd told someone who'd eventually told me. They'd treated my suffering like entertainment. It was 2 weeks before Christmas when I'd hit my absolute lowest point. I'd been sick for a month, the cough turning into something deeper, making my chest hurt. I'd been sleeping in my car in a parking lot behind a closed shopping center trying to stay warm. I'd had $150 to my name, and that had to cover gas, food, and my prepaid phone for the month. I'd sat in that car shivering, and I'd thought about just ending it all. Not my life, but the fight. Thought about finding Brad agreeing to any terms he wanted, signing anything, admitting to anything, just to make it stop. But then I'd thought about his face that morning when he'd told me I'd get nothing. The satisfaction in his eyes, the cruelty, and something hardened inside me. A core of anger so cold and so focused that it burned away the despair. I wasn't going to give him that satisfaction. I was going to survive this, and then I was going to thrive. Not because I wanted revenge, though that would be sweet, but because I wanted him to be irrelevant. I wanted to build a life so good that he became nothing but a bad memory. That night, freezing in my car, I'd made a new plan. This time I'd do it right. This time I'd become completely invisible. I'd opened a new bank account in a different state. Nevada, to be specific. I'd driven 3 hours, used my P.O. box in Carson City that I'd set up online, walked into a bank as if I had every right to be there. The account was in my name, only completely separate from anything Brad could access or trace. I'd created a new business identity, not in my name. I'd registered a simple DBA doing business as called DN Marketing Solutions, used my Carson City address, set up new accounts on all the freelancing platforms under this business name. New email, new phone number through a virtual service, new everything. If Brad somehow found my old profiles, they'd be empty, abandoned. DN Marketing Solutions had no connection to Danita Thompson, at least not one he could easily trace. It was January now, a new year. I'd been fighting for 3 months, 3 months of hell, but I was done being a victim, done being reactive. From now on, I was going to be strategic, invisible, and relentless. I'd kept sleeping in my car, rotating locations. Church parking lots, hospital parking garages, rest stops, never the same place twice in a row. I'd used truck stop showers, 24-hour gyms, anywhere I could clean up. I'd eaten as little as possible, mostly protein bars and peanut butter sandwiches I'd make in my car. Every penny went back into the business. I'd rebuilt my client base slowly. January, I'd landed 4 new clients. Small businesses mostly, $200 to $300 a month each. DN Marketing Solutions was professional, responsive, excellent at what it did. I'd worked 16-hour days, 7 days a week, no breaks, no excuses. February, I'd expanded. 8 clients. I'd raised my rates to $400 a month minimum. My work was getting better, more sophisticated. I was teaching myself advanced skills using free YouTube videos and library computers. SEO optimization, paid advertising strategies, email marketing funnels, content calendars, analytics. The business grew to 12 clients in March. I was making $6,800 a month. Real money, life-changing money. I could afford a studio apartment, but I didn't take one. Not yet. Because every dollar I didn't spend was a dollar I could invest back into learning, into tools, into growth. I did rent a serviced office space mailbox in a nice building, used that as my business address. Made DN Marketing Solutions look legitimate, professional, worth premium rates. By April, everything changed. I'd landed a major client, a regional business, with 12 locations across 3 states. They needed a complete social media overhaul. Someone to manage all their accounts, create content, run ad campaigns, handle customer service through social channels. They'd interviewed 3 agencies. I'd been the only solo freelancer they'd considered. My proposal had been thorough, professional, confident. I'd shown them growth metrics from my other clients. I'd explained my strategy. I'd been honest about being a one-person operation, but had emphasized the personal attention that provided. They'd offered me $5,000 a month. $5,000. I'd nearly cried during the video call, but had kept my composure, negotiated up to $5,500 because I knew my worth. With that anchor client, plus my other 12, I'd been making $11,000 a month. More money than I'd ever imagined. More than Brad made. More than most people in our town made. I'd finally rented an apartment. Nothing fancy, just a studio for $850 a month. But it had heat, hot water, a real bed. I'd bought a decent laptop for $400. Started eating regular meals. Gained back the weight I'd lost. Got antibiotics for the cough that had plagued me for months. But I'd stayed focused. Hungry. Driven. Because this wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about building something so successful that Brad would never be able to touch it. Something so far beyond his reach that he'd realized too late what I'd become. That was when Brad filed to finalize the divorce. I'd seen the papers in early May delivered to my Carson City P.O. box. He wanted it over. Wanted to marry Sandra. His lawyer demanded I sign documents agreeing to zero settlement. No house equity, no savings split, no alimony, nothing. His lawyer's letter had been almost gleeful. They clearly thought I was still broke, still desperate, still the woman sleeping in her car. They figured I'd sign anything just to end the nightmare. I'd thought about it for exactly 5 minutes. Then I'd called the lawyer back. "I'll sign. Send me the final papers." The lawyer had been confused. "You're not going to contest this. You understand you're walking away with nothing." "I understand perfectly. Send the papers." They'd arrived 3 days later. I'd signed every page, had them notarized at a UPS store, sent them back. The divorce was finalized within a week. Brad had posted about it on social media. Closing one chapter, beginning another, with my beautiful fiancée Sandra. Grateful for new beginnings and lessons learned. The comments were full of congratulations, people celebrating his fresh start. I'd felt nothing looking at it. No anger, no pain, just a distant sense that he'd already lost and didn't even know it. Because while he was posting selfies with Sandra and planning his expensive wedding, I was scaling my business. May I had 18 clients and I was making $22,000 a month. June, 25 clients, $38,000 a month. I'd hired 2 virtual assistance workers in the Philippines who handled the routine tasks for my clients. I'd taught them my systems, trained them on my standards. That freed me up to focus on landing bigger clients, developing new services, creating premium offerings. I'd moved to a better apartment, $1,200 a month, 1 bedroom in a safer neighborhood. I'd bought professional equipment, good camera, lighting, proper editing software. I wasn't just managing social media anymore. I was creating complete digital marketing strategies. In June, while Brad was getting married to Sandra in a ceremony that cost them $50,000 according to the photos I'd seen online, I'd launched my first online course, Social Media Mastery for Small Businesses, $297. I'd spent a month creating it, 40 videos covering everything I'd learned. It sold to 37 people the first week. $11,000 in passive income. I'd nearly fainted when I'd seen the numbers. The course kept selling. Word of mouth spread. I'd built an email list of 15,000 people, all of them interested in digital marketing, all of them potential customers. I'd written weekly emails giving away valuable content for free, building trust and authority. My story resonated with people, though I'd never mentioned Brad by name. I'd talked about starting my business with nothing about learning through libraries and free resources about the hustle and determination it took. People loved the underdog story. They didn't know just how much of an underdog I'd been. I'd moved again in August, 3 hours away from our old town. A city I'd always dreamed of living in, where the streets were busy and nobody knew my history. I'd rented a 2-bedroom apartment, $1,800 a month. The second bedroom became my office. A real office with a desk and proper lighting, and a bookshelf full of marketing books I'd bought and devoured. By September, DN Marketing Solutions was generating $88,000 a month in revenue. After paying my virtual assistants and other expenses, I was clearing about $65,000. I'd hired a bookkeeper, a real accountant who handled my taxes properly. Everything was legal, documented, professional. I'd saved $180,000 in my business account, had another $20,000 in my personal savings, zero debt. My credit score, which Brad had destroyed, was rebuilt to 750. I'd started investing, index funds, retirement accounts, building wealth the smart way. I was on track to hit millionaire status within 18 months if the trajectory continued. And through it all, Brad had no idea. He was living his life with Sandra, working his same job, making his same salary, thinking he'd won, thinking I was somewhere broken and defeated. It was October, 14 months after that night, when Brad had confessed over cold pasta. I was sitting in my apartment reviewing my business dashboard. DN Marketing Solutions had 28 active clients, most of them paying between $1,500 and $5,000 a month. My online courses had sold to over 500 students. My revenue was steady at $90,000 a month. I'd been featured in 2 digital marketing podcasts talking about building a business from scratch. I'd been careful not to share too many personal details, kept the focus on strategy and tactics. But the exposure had led to more clients, more course sales, more growth. I'd made new friends through networking groups and business meetups. People who knew me as a successful entrepreneur, not as Brad's ex-wife. People who respected my expertise, who asked my advice, who saw me as powerful and competent. It was intoxicating, after months of being treated like I was crazy or broken. I'd even started dating. Nothing serious yet, just casual dinners with a man named Marcus. I'd met at a conference. He ran his own consulting business, understood the entrepreneurial lifestyle. We'd talked for hours about business, about ambition, about building something meaningful. He'd made me laugh. I'd forgotten what that felt like. I was happy, genuinely happy. For the first time in years, maybe for the first time ever, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. That's when the LinkedIn message came through. I'd been checking my professional profile, responding to connection requests when I saw it. From Sandra Bradley. She'd kept her maiden name professionally, I realized. Smart woman, in another life we might have been friends. Hi, Danita. I hope this message finds you well. I'm reaching out because I came across DN Marketing Solutions and was impressed by your client portfolio. My firm is looking for a social media partner to handle our corporate accounts and some of our clients' overflow work. Would you be interested in discussing a potential partnership? The budget is $10,000 per month to start. Let me know if you'd like to schedule a call. I'd stared at that message for a long time. Sandra didn't realize it was me. DN Marketing Solutions had no personal information attached, no photo of me, nothing that would connect it to Danita Thompson. She was reaching out as one professional to another. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to stay hidden, to keep them at arm's length. But another part of me, the part that had survived 3 months of homelessness and hunger and cold, that part wanted to face them, wanted them to see what I'd become. I'd accepted the meeting. The video call was scheduled for a Monday afternoon. I'd dressed professionally, done my hair and makeup, carefully set up my camera so the background showed my clean, organized office. I'd looked successful because I was successful. When Sandra's face appeared on the screen, I'd watched her expression change. Confusion then, recognition, then shock. Danita. Hello, Sandra. Thank you for reaching out about a potential partnership. She'd struggled to compose herself. I didn't realize. DN Marketing Solutions, that's your company. It is. I started it about 14 months ago. We specialize in social media management and digital marketing strategy. I understand your firm is looking for support. Yes, but I don't think. This is awkward. Why is it awkward? I run a successful marketing agency. You need marketing services. This is just business. She'd looked off camera, probably at someone else in her office. Let me call you back. But she hadn't called back. She'd sent an email an hour later, accepting the contract. I'd figured out why later. They'd already told their clients about bringing on a partner. They'd made promises. And my portfolio was legitimately impressive. They needed me, even if Sandra hated admitting it. I'd signed the contract. $10,000 a month, 6-month commitment. I'd assigned my best virtual assistant to the account supervised personally. The work was impeccable. Sandra's clients were thrilled. Her firm's social media engagement doubled in the first month. Brad had found out 2 weeks into the contract. Sandra must have told him, or maybe he'd seen a payment to DN Marketing Solutions on their business account and looked it up. Either way, my phone had rung one evening, a number I didn't recognize. I'd answered. Danita. His voice was tight, angry. We need to talk. I don't think we do, Brad. The divorce is finalized. We have nothing to discuss. You're working with Sandra. That's my wife. You're deliberately inserting yourself into our lives. Your wife reached out to my business for professional services. I provided those services. This has nothing to do with you. Bullshit. You're trying to sabotage us. Actually, from what I understand, your wife's firm is very happy with my work. Their client retention has improved significantly. How are you even doing this? You were homeless. You were broke. You couldn't even keep a job at a bookstore. His words had stung, even though I'd known they would. That was 14 months ago, Brad. People change. Circumstances change. How much are you making? The question was blunt, invasive. That's not your business anymore. It is if you hid assets during the divorce. I could reopen the settlement claim you defrauded me. I'd laughed then. Couldn't help it. Go ahead and try. Every penny I've made came after you emptied our accounts and threw me out. I built this business from nothing with no help from you. Actually, with active sabotage from you. Good luck explaining to a judge why you're entitled to anything. He'd been quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different, smaller. Sandra says, you're making good money. Real good money. I do okay. Better than okay. Better than me, she said. Maybe you should work harder. The call had ended badly. He'd made threats, vague accusations about fraud and misconduct. I'd stayed calm, professional, then hung up and blocked his number. But Brad hadn't stopped there. He'd never been able to leave things alone. Over the next 2 weeks, I'd noticed strange things. Negative reviews appearing on my business profiles, all from accounts that had never been clients. Comments on my social media calling me a scam artist. Reports filed with the Better Business Bureau claiming I'd taken money and not delivered services. It was all fake, all traceable, back to IP addresses that matched Brad's location. He was trying to destroy my business the same way he'd destroyed my life before. But this time I had resources. This time I had a lawyer. A good one. My lawyer had been thrilled when I'd explained the situation. This is textbook harassment and defamation. We can file suit and we'll win. He's left a digital trail a mile wide. But, more than that, my lawyer had found something else. Brad had used his work computer and work IP address for some of his harassment campaign, which meant he'd been using company resources for personal vendettas. That was a fireable offense. I'd sent a simple email to Sandra's firm copying their HR department and general counsel. I'm experiencing ongoing harassment from one of your employees, Brad Thompson. Attached is documentation showing he's using company equipment to file false reports and post defamatory content about my business. I'm sure this violates your acceptable use policies. I trust you'll handle this appropriately. Sandra had called me directly 2 days later. Her voice had been cold professional. We need to discuss terminating our contract. Because your husband is harassing me. Because this situation has become untenable. Brad's behavior is unacceptable, but continuing to work together will only make things worse. I agree. but the contract has a termination clause. 4 weeks' notice, plus a penalty fee of $20,000. $20,000. You sign the contract, Sandra. Read section 7.3. She'd been quiet. This is extortion. No, it's business. You're welcome to honor the contract and continue working with me. My team will remain professional. Or you can terminate and pay the fee. Your choice. They'd paid the fee. I hadn't expected anything else. But the real consequence for Brad came a week later. Sandra's firm had investigated his use of company resources. They'd found all the evidence. The harassment campaign, the hours spent during work time, stalking my business, the fake accounts created using company internet. He'd been fired. I'd heard about it through a mutual contact who'd reached out curious about what had happened between us. Brad's telling everyone you got him fired, says you're vindictive and cruel. But between you and me, people are starting to ask questions. His story doesn't add up. Brad had shown up at my office the following Monday. My actual office, the small professional space I'd leased 3 months earlier. He'd somehow found the address waited in the parking lot until he'd seen me arrive. I'd called the police immediately, but before they arrived, he'd cornered me in the hallway. He looked terrible. Unshaven, wrinkled clothes, eyes red-rimmed. Please, his voice broke. Please stop this. I lost my job. Sandra is furious with me. Our marriage is falling apart. I'm going to lose everything. I'd looked at this man who'd once been my husband, who'd emptied our bank account, who'd made me homeless, who'd systematically destroyed every attempt I'd made to rebuild my life, and I'd felt nothing. No satisfaction, no anger, just emptiness. I'm not doing anything to you, Brad. You did this to yourself. I made mistakes. I know that. But this, what you're doing, it's revenge. It's cruel. What I'm doing, I'm running a business. You're the one who's been filing false reports, posting fake reviews, harassing my clients. You did it to me when I was working at the bookstore, when I was freelancing. You just never stopped. The only difference now is that I have the resources to fight back. I'll sign anything. A restraining order. A non-contact agreement. Just drop the lawsuit. My lawyer had filed suit for defamation and harassment the previous week. The case was solid. We'd win easily. The lawsuit proceeds, but I'll agree to a settlement. You pay my legal fees, you sign a contract, agreeing never to contact me again directly or indirectly. You stay 500 feet away from me at all times. Any violation results in an automatic $100,000 penalty. And you stop the harassment campaign immediately. Delete every fake review, every false report, every defamatory post. $100,000, I don't have that kind of money. Then don't violate the agreement. He'd signed the next day. His lawyer had tried to negotiate, but I'd refused. This was the deal. Take it or see me in court, where the penalties would be much worse. The police had escorted him from my office that day. I'd watched him walk to his car, shoulders slumped, defeated, and I'd realized something important. I'd won. Not because I'd destroyed him, though he'd done a pretty good job destroying himself, but because he was irrelevant now. He couldn't hurt me anymore, couldn't reach me, couldn't touch anything I'd built. I'd turned my pain into power, my desperation into determination, my rock bottom into a foundation. 2 months later, December rolled around again. Exactly 16 months since that night at the dining table when Brad had confessed and expected me to break. I was sitting in my apartment, the nice one with the city view and the real office, and the kitchen where I actually cooked meals. My laptop was open to my business dashboard. DN Marketing Solutions had brought in $97,000 in November. After all expenses, I'd cleared $72,000. My savings account had hit $230,000. My retirement accounts had another $80,000. My business was valued at over $1 million based on its annual revenue and client retention rates. I'd officially crossed into millionaire status. Net worth over $1 million. 16 months from homeless to millionaire. It felt surreal. But the money wasn't really the point. Don't get me wrong, financial security after months of hunger and cold was incredible. Being able to pay bills without anxiety, to buy groceries without calculating every dollar, to sleep in a warm bed every night, those things mattered tremendously. But the real wealth was something different. It was the freedom, the peace, the knowledge that I'd built something entirely my own, something nobody could take away from me. It was waking up every morning excited about my work instead of dreading another day. It was having friends who respected me, clients who valued me, a life that felt authentic and purposeful. I'd thought a lot about that journey over the past few weeks, about the woman I'd been sitting at that dining table eating cold pasta while my husband casually destroyed my world, about the months that followed, each one worse than the last, about sleeping in my car, about being so hungry I'd felt dizzy, about the cough that wouldn't go away because I couldn't afford a doctor. About the moment in that diner when I'd overheard those two young women and realized I'd been fighting the wrong battle. About choosing to become invisible to build something Brad couldn't see or control or destroy. About the countless 16-hour days, the exhaustion, the fear that it wouldn't work. And about the moment I'd realized I'd won. Not when I made my first million. Not when Brad got fired, or when Sandra paid the contract termination fee. But earlier than that, it was the moment I'd stopped caring what he thought, what he did, whether he knew or didn't know about my success. The moment he became irrelevant. I'd learned something profound during those 16 months. When someone tries to destroy you using traditional systems, courts, lawyers, social manipulation, you can't always beat them at their own game. Especially if they have more resources, more connections, more willingness to lie and manipulate. But you can build your own game, your own playing field, somewhere they can't reach you, can't hurt you. You can become so focused on building something meaningful that their attacks bounce off harmlessly because they're no longer aimed at anything that matters. Brad had tried to make me dependent on him, on his money, on his approval. He'd systematically removed every traditional avenue of support, my job, my friends, my home, my savings. He'd been thorough and cruel and effective. But he'd made one critical mistake. He'd assumed that destroying everything I had would break me. He'd assumed I'd come crawling back broken and desperate, willing to accept whatever scraps he offered. Instead, I discovered I didn't need any of it. Not the house with my name, not on the deed, not the friends who believed his lies, not the traditional job where one person's false accusations could end my career. I'd learned I could build something from absolute zero with nothing but determination and a laptop and public Wi-Fi. That lesson was worth more than the $1 million in my accounts. I'd heard through that same mutual contact that Brad and Sandra's marriage was struggling. Turned out that relationships built on betrayal don't have strong foundations. Who knew they'd sold their expensive house, moved into something smaller? Sandra's business was barely staying afloat. Brad was working at a different marketing firm, making less money, unhappy but stuck. They were ordinary, trapped, living with the consequences of their choices. And me, I was thriving. I'd met Marcus for dinner 3 nights ago. We'd talked about taking a vacation together, maybe Costa Rica in January. I hadn't had a real vacation in years. The idea of sitting on a beach, no stress, no fear, just peace and sunshine. It sounded like paradise. My business was expanding. I'd hired a full-time operations manager to handle day-to-day client work, freeing me up to focus on strategy and growth. I was considering starting a second business, maybe a coaching program for women entrepreneurs. I'd gotten dozens of emails from women asking how I'd built my success, wanting to learn my methods. I'd also started volunteering. There was a local women's shelter, and I'd reached out to them about teaching free digital marketing workshops. Skills that women leaving bad situations could use to build independent income. I'd been there. I knew how crucial it was to have options, to have skills, to have something nobody could take away. The director of the shelter had cried when I'd explained what I wanted to do. We get women all the time who need job skills but can't afford training. This will change lives. That mattered to me more than another client, another dollar in my account. Using my experience, my hard-won knowledge to help other women avoid my fate or escape it faster. That felt like purpose. I'd also started therapy finally, working through the trauma of those months. The fear, the hunger, the cold, the feeling of being hunted. The betrayal of someone I'd loved and trusted. It was slow work, painful work, but necessary. I was healing. My therapist had asked me last week if I felt like Brad had won given how much he'd hurt me, how much suffering he'd caused. I'd thought about it carefully before answering. He hurt me badly. He took things from me that I can't get back, those months of my life, that sense of safety. But he didn't win. Because he tried to destroy me, and instead he just cleared the ground for me to build something better. He wanted me broken and dependent and desperate. I'm none of those things, so no, he didn't win. Do you feel like you won? I feel like I survived, and then I thrived. If that's winning, then yes. Tonight, sitting in my apartment with my coffee, the good kind from the local roaster, not diner refills, I thought about what I'd tell that woman from 16 months ago. The one sitting at the dining table, fork in hand, world crashing down around her. I'd tell her that rock bottom can be a foundation. That when someone takes everything from you, they inadvertently give you the freedom to rebuild however you want. That the traditional paths, the ones that feel safe and stable, those can be traps. But building something entirely your own, something that exists outside those systems, that's true security. I'd tell her that the best revenge isn't destroying the person who hurt you. It's becoming so fulfilled, so successful, so genuinely happy that they become a footnote in your story. A chapter that ended. A lesson that taught you what you're truly capable of. I'd tell her that she's stronger than she knows, that the pain will be terrible, worse than she can imagine, but that she'll survive it. And that on the other side of all that suffering is a life better than anything she'd dreamed possible. Most importantly, I'd tell her this: when someone tries to fight you on their battlefield, don't engage. Build your own battlefield. Somewhere they can't reach, can't understand, can't control. Fight smart, not fair. Survive first, thrive second, and let revenge be the success they can't touch. I closed my laptop, looked out at the city lights, and smiled. Tomorrow, I had meetings with 2 potential clients, both offering significant contracts. Next week, I was speaking at a digital marketing conference, sharing my expertise with 300 attendees. Next month, I was going to Costa Rica with a man who made me laugh and who respected my ambition. I finished my dinner quietly that night 16 months ago. I've been dining at much better tables ever since. Before I go, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had to completely rebuild your life from nothing? Have you ever faced someone who seemed determined to destroy you? What did you do? How did you survive? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, if it gave you hope or inspiration, or just reminded you that you're stronger than you think, please hit that like button, subscribe to hear more stories like this, share this with someone who might need to hear it, someone who's going through their own struggle and needs to know that survival is possible, that thriving is possible. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you that your rock bottom can become your foundation, that your pain can become your power, that you're capable of so much more than you realize. Stay strong, keep fighting, build something they can't touch.